really proven to be a stepping stone for people like Triple H, The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Bret Hart, who have all gone on to win the WWE Championship, the biggest prize in the industry, or at least that's what it was referred to back in the 90s. Now it's referred to as a spinner belt, which is nothing more than a prop nowadays, unfortunately. But I think that Cody Rhodes' attempts to restore a bit of prestigiousness to the Intercontinental Championship is what every championship needs in this industry. Jim Ross himself even said he liked the idea of the new WWE Intercontinental Championship belt being thrown in the trash at a recent WWE pay-per-view offering and being replaced by the original Intercontinental Championship, the same title that made The Rock a famous celebrity, the same title that turned the game from a blue blood into a cerebral assassin. I think that Jim Ross's assumption of how the Intercontinental Championship division has taken a turn for the better was completely correct, and I like the idea of how he mentioned he liked the idea of the Intercontinental Championship being brought back to its original state. That brings about the question now, is the Intercontinental Championship going to remain in its original state, or is it just being done to get Cody Rhodes over as a Intercontinental Champion with a bit of pride? I'd love to see the Intercontinental Championship be defended in its original form 24/7. I hope it's not just something done to get Cody Rhodes over as a disfigured individual who is using the Intercontinental Championship as a bit of confidence and a bit of momentum for himself. I'd love to see the Intercontinental Championship stay in its original state. It kind of puts me in mind of how the $1 Million Championship was brought back for the first time in over 20 years by the son of the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase Jr. They could have turned that $1 Million Championship into a division for mid-card individuals who weren't being given the opportunity to be in main events. And Ted DiBiase, not taking anything away from him, could have easily been a main eventer. He could have gone from mid-card to main event overnight if WWE would have allowed him to do so. But I'll never forget the legendary matches between Ted DiBiase and Jake Roberts, one match even taking place in New York City over the $1 Million Championship. Many people have tried to compete for the $1 Million Championship, but Jake Roberts was the only individual who came close to wrestling away the $1 Million Championship from Ted DiBiase, who defended it against some of his most known foes in the business. I think that they could have easily made the $1 Million Championship a division. They didn't do that, and they could have easily done more with the Intercontinental Championship in the past. They just didn't want to do it. So it's nice to know that the Intercontinental Championship's being brought back and being recognized for what it truly meant to the wrestling industry, especially in the 80s when the title was held by Pat Patterson and even Scott Hall, who held the Intercontinental Championship and defended it against the likes of Rick Martel in 1994, IRS. He also defended against Shawn Michaels in the first ladder match. A lot of Razor Ramon's greatest matches, better known as Scott Hall nowadays, part of the NWO and WCW, and part of the Clique before he ever formed the NWO with Kevin Nash. It seemed like the Intercontinental Championship brought some of the best matches out of the likes of Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon. Shawn Michaels defended the Intercontinental Championship against some of professional wrestling's biggest names, Sid Justice and Jeff Jarrett, who would later go on to form TNA Wrestling. I think that the Intercontinental Championship's meant a lot to the business. Now, in recent years, it hasn't been defended as much, and I like the idea of how WWE always seems to include an Intercontinental Championship match on a television program, at least more so than they did probably 5 years ago, and at least it's being defended at pay-per-views now. Putting Cody Rhodes in a match against John Morrison was a stroke of pure genius. And I think the Intercontinental Championship, if he were to be booked in a feud with Cody Rhodes over the IC title, would give John Morrison a push in the positive direction he needs to be heading in, because it seems like for the better part now, the last 4 to 6 months, John Morrison's been booked to lose. He helped R-Truth get over as a heel, making the transition from a babyface to a heel, and ever since then it seems like John Morrison's been booked to lose. So I'd love to see Rhodes versus Morrison for the Intercontinental Championship. At least that will give John Morrison a bit of his credibility back, being known as a former Intercontinental Champion himself and Jeff Hardy having phenomenal Intercontinental Championship matches, which even saw a ladder match on Raw several years ago over that very same title. John Morrison really puts me in mind of a young Shawn Michaels who held the Intercontinental Championship as one of his greatest championships and really made a metamorphosis from being a mid-carder into a main eventer overnight. And John Morrison has that swagger, that arrogant attitude that could easily be classified as the same kind of attitude that Shawn Michaels had back in '93, '94 when Sensational Sherry was responsible for creating the HBK gimmick. Shawn Michaels himself even admitted in an interview that if it wasn't for Sensational Sherry, there would be no Heartbreak Kid and there would be no greatest Intercontinental Champion of all time. I'll never forget the angle when Shawn Michaels went around proclaiming himself to be the undisputed Intercontinental Champion, and himself and Razor Ramon had two title belts building up for the WrestleMania match in New York City, the anniversary of WrestleMania 10, when they had a ladder match for the two Intercontinental Championships, and the winner of the match, of course, was Razor Ramon, a.k.a. Scott Hall. He went on to become the undisputed Intercontinental Champion of the business in the first ladder match that saw Shawn Michaels take a leap of faith from 15 feet in the air on top of Razor Ramon, utilizing the splash, which he would go on to include in his move arsenal many years later. I think that, the Intercontinental Championship's done a lot. I mean, Bret Hart, one of the greatest Intercontinental Champions of all time. The Honky Tonk Man, without a doubt, the greatest Intercontinental Champion of all time. Santino Marella tried to break his record. In later years, he failed to do so, and he even had the opportunity to face Santino Marella for the Intercontinental Championship at a Taboo Tuesday or Cyber Sunday pay-per-view. I forget what it was called. But I remember seeing Santino Marella actually face the Honky Tonk Man. I interviewed the Honky Tonk Man. It was a bit of fun. And the Intercontinental Champions that I have interviewed were a bit of fun. They always were fun to interview because they remember being the Intercontinental Champion as some of the greatest moments of their career, and rightfully so, because the Intercontinental Championship, as I said, brought a lot of the best matches at a lot of the big names in the business. Bret Hart, who was one of the individuals who managed to defend the Intercontinental Championship with a bit of pride, and always kept the Intercontinental Championship being referred to as a prestigious championship. You had Jeff Jarrett, who was a phenomenal Intercontinental Champion, defeating Razor Ramon at the 1995 Royal Rumble to capture the Intercontinental Championship and go on to defend it against the likes of Shawn Michaels, who he actually dropped the title to in 1995. And I'll never forget that match between Shawn Michaels and Sid over the Intercontinental Championship in 1995. The rematch between Razor Ramon and Shawn Michaels for the Intercontinental Championship in a ladder match at SummerSlam 1995, over a year after the original ladder match had taken place. Shawn Michaels gets a bit of redemption and payback by winning the match. Great way to allow Shawn Michaels to be catapulted into being a future WWE Champion, acquiring the title on March 31st of 1996. As I said, there have been many great Intercontinental Champions in the past, and if you've seen the history of the Intercontinental Championship DVD, it's a multi-disc set. It's a phenomenal exemplification, I guess is the word you could use to describe the history of the Intercontinental Championship DVD set, that really puts what the Intercontinental Championship has meant to this business over the last 50 years or so. I think that the idea that WWE has right now is they're trying to restore some credibility to titles who have lost their credibility over the last 20 years, and I hope that the United States Championship, the Tag Team Championships, most definitely the Tag Team Championships, because WWE are really putting tag teams together just for the sake of having a tag team division, because there are no more Hardys, there are no more Legion of Dooms, there are no more Hart Foundations or Killer Bees to rely on. I hope that WWE try to continue to restore some credibility to championships, and I'm begging them to get rid of that WWE prototype belt. I hate it. I really do hate the idea that you can go out now at Walmart or Toys R Us and buy a spinner belt where the belt actually has the logo spinning in the middle of it. As I said, the WWE Championship is a prop. And a question I have for the listening audience: do you think that many of WWE Championship belts now have become known as props more than prestigious prizes to acquisite for your career? I think the King of the Ring and the Royal Rumble now are more important than titles like the Intercontinental Championship and the United States title, and that's unfortunate, be it that the U.S. title catapulted the careers of Ric Flair, Sting, and Vader, for Christ's sake. I think that, definitely the King of the Ring tournament, as stupid as it is now, a rip-off from what we saw back in 93, 94, and 95, giving platforms for people like Owen Hart and Bret Hart to really become future champions. The King of the Ring tournament, as stupid as it is more prestigious now than the Intercontinental title, mainly because the IC title hasn't been defended as much as it should have been over the last half of a decade. The tag team titles, there's not a big tag team division anymore, and WWE are putting together tag teams now just for the sake of having tag teams put together. It's a crying shame, and I think that the wrestling business is in a jeopardizable state when it comes to the tag team division, and a jeopardizable state probably for the Intercontinental Championship as well. But the Intercontinental Championship, with the restoration of the original title now, has a bit of hope. I'll never forget the Ken Shamrock Rock matches over the Intercontinental Championship, and how phenomenal of an IC champion The Rock was when he was a part of the Nation. I mean, Ken Shamrock versus The Rock is a vintage collection match worth showing over and over and over again. Stone Cold Steve Austin broke his neck over the Intercontinental Championship in 1997 in a match against the late great Owen Hart, and Stone Cold would go on to win the Intercontinental title multi-times in his career. Triple H would go on to win the Intercontinental title multi-times in 1997, having memorable programs for that very same title with Mankind, Goldust. I mean, he's done it all. The Intercontinental Championship has provided a platform for some of professional wrestling's greatest legends. There are many wrestlers who should have held the Intercontinental title that never had the opportunity to do so. So I think that people that were handed the Intercontinental Championship on a silver platter definitely deserved it. I think that, when Mr. Perfect helped Hunter Hearst Helmsley win the Intercontinental title for the first time on a memorable edition of Raw, when it was Helmsley versus Mark Merrow, that was great too. That was a moment in Intercontinental Championship history that has never been forgotten, and that's probably one of the main reasons why, apart from being a great in-ring technician, Mr. Perfect has made the Intercontinental Championship so known and has become such a huge part of the